Call ourselves into order for this special called meeting of the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Carroll. Senator Caslin. Senator Douglas. Senator Givens. Senator Kerr. Senator McGarvey. Senator Meredith. Senator Nemes.
Present.
Senator Webb. Senator West. Chair McDaniel.
Here. All right. Being duly constituted, having a quorum being duly constituted to conduct business, we're ready to go. First, we want to make a note. Today is the last day in LRC for Grant Minix, sitting right over here to my right. Since May, he's been the graduate fellow assigned to the A&R committee staff. He's done several research projects for us, including assisting with parimutuel wagering taxation task force and being the primary drafter of that final report. He's graduating from EKU in May with a Master's of Public Administration with a concentration in community development, and he's accepted a position with the Council of State Governments. So, Grant, we wish you well in all of your future endeavors and look forward to seeing you very soon. All right, and now that we've done that, I guess we can go. No. All right. The other item on the agenda today is Senate Bill 194. There is a committee substitute to that bill that is in the members' packets. At this time, I will entertain a motion on the committee substitute. By Senator Meredith. Do I have a second? By Senator Nemes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The committee substitute is adopted. Since I'm the sponsor, I'll speak to it from up here. Across the Commonwealth and across the nation, there's a pretty big problem right now. As the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported most recently, our inflation rate is at a 40-year high of 7.5%. For the average family, that means their costs for their household, not changing anything, will go up roughly $267 per month just for the essentials. Now, when we get down here to Frankfort frequently, we find ourselves bogged down with many, many issues. And sometimes the ones that are most pressing to everyday Kentuckians don't get addressed in a timely manner. However, today, with Senate Bill 194, we are doing just that in addressing those. That biggest issue of inflation. In the urban areas of Kentucky, and I want to put a quick plug in here, if you want to read what to me is one of the most informative documents in the Commonwealth, the annual economic report that comes out from the University of Kentucky, authored by Dr. Clark, who used to be here with us, probably has some of the best data for public finance people that you can imagine. For the urban areas in our state, that document reports that the median household income in Kentucky is $52,000. For somewhat rural areas, it's at $41,800, and for rural areas, it's at $38,400. The median household income in the Commonwealth for a household with two working parents is $55,760. In Kentucky, we take 6.3% of the average Kentuckian's income in income tax. The average in the United States is 5.4%, and the average in our competitor states is only 5.2%. Senate Bill 194 today addresses some of those disparities while at the same time addressing the crushing inflation that average citizens are dealing with. Under this bill, we will be refunding to single taxpayers who are residents of the Commonwealth up to $500 of personal income tax, and for joint filers inside of a household who are residents of the Commonwealth, we will be refunding them up to $1,000. This will be based off of the tax return that was filed last year by those filers and is the lesser of the amount of the total tax burden paid or the amount that I stated previously. So what this means is if you are a household who paid $750 in personal income tax last year, this coming year, or by the end of the summer, you will have a refund for that whole $750. If you're a household who paid over $1,000 in Kentucky state income tax last year, you will receive a refund of $1,000. The total cost of this proposal should not exceed $1.15 billion, and that in current year appropriation, and that is accounted for in Section 4 of the budget. There's an emergency clause attached to this so that the money can be appropriated into the appropriate fund and then expended. So that's what the background and what happens inside of this bill, and at this point I'll gladly entertain any questions from the committee. Senator Givens.
So, Mr. Chairman, you've explained this quite clearly. Talk briefly, first of all, my first question is talk briefly again about the mechanism so it's crystal in my mind. We're discussing the tax year of 2020, correct?
It would have been for wages you earned in 2020 and then paid in 2021.
That's correct. So the tax year of 2020. And we are saying a filer that had tax due and paid that tax to the state would stand to potentially get a refund. That refund amount is going to be the lesser of what was paid in, or $500. Household would be $1,000 or lesser.
Correct.
For the case of a household. When we discuss the impact that this is going to have on, speak to the question of our ability as a state to afford this. And I'd like to rephrase that question. Thank you for the latitude to rephrase it. I'd like for you to speak to the ability of the state to send back to the taxpayers some of the money that they sent to us.
Sure.
Speak to that if you would.
And I appreciate the opportunity to explain that. And it goes to a fundamental item that we've discussed many, many times in this committee and on the floor, which is all the dollars that we spend are not dollars that we generate. These are dollars that people generate by the investment of time in their life. And through the last 2 years of the pandemic, we've written exceptionally conservative budgets and also seen receipts dramatically in excess of the anticipated expenses. And so by consequence, we have this year alone that ends on June the 30th, we will recognize about $1.94 billion of excess revenue above expenditures. As mentioned and stated in Section 4, the total cost is about $1.15 billion. So there's about $830 million of revenue still remaining in the current year, even after this expenditure is made.
So follow up on that, because the words we use and their meaning are not different, but I want to clarify, this still leaves money in the Budget Reserve Trust Fund. What amount do we know?
So that's an excellent
When we
question.
say
So in
excess,
addition to the money that I just referenced, that $800 million, there's another $1.5 billion on top of that in the Budget Reserve Trust Fund. So if we were not to expend the other $800 million, on June the 30th, the Budget Reserve Trust Fund would swell to $2.3 billion.
excellent. So there is substantial rainy day monies for us to roll into the next year, because the unknowns ahead are changing daily. Mr. Chairman, we just talked a moment ago about Russia's activity and the anxiety and uncertainty that's going to create. The inflation pressures that you mentioned as a guiding principle for this are going to ripple across every project that states and cities and counties and schools do and try to execute. So You're saying that we still carry forward the full budget reserve trust fund of 1.78? What did you say?
1.5, and certainly if we add the 800 million to that, we will swell to 2.3.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gibbons. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Senator Carroll.
Mr. Chairman, can you speak a little bit about the distribution of this and how the comparison between those who are at the upper end of the socioeconomic scale and those at the lower end, and how this allocation, the fairness of the distribution?
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. So if you were to take a very basic example of a family who makes $40,000 in a year at a 5% income tax, they're paying $2,000 to the Commonwealth, and so by extension, this is 50% of their tax money refunded to them. If you took a family who's doing better and say making $100,000 a year and paying $5,000 in tax, this is 20% of their income tax refunded to them. So necessarily, lower income folks will have a much higher percentage of their tax burden refunded to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir. Senator Meredith.
I thank you for this bill, Senator McDaniels. You may recall a couple of weeks ago I asked Budget Director Hicks if, as they were formulating their budget, if any consideration was given to any type of tax break for citizens, because we were in such a strong financial position, and he seemed to be almost encouraged, so I asked the question. Certainly my preference would be that we could reduce the overall tax rate for our working Kentuckians, but I think this is the most financially responsible way to do it, given the surplus we have. And I think we forget sometimes that 50% of the income in this state is exempt from taxation. And we have about 43% of our working age adults that are not in the labor force, so these are a very small percentage of our population that's carrying the full tax burden for the state. And I don't have any numbers to support it, but I suspicion it is those folks who are in the $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 wage range. They're carrying the burden for us. And I think to be able to share the financial success we've achieved over the last 2 or 3 years is timely, particularly given the inflation that we're facing right now. Is this a perfect bill? There is no such thing, we know this, but I think this goes a long way towards showing that the people who are paying the bills of the state, that we recognize that and we're willing to share in the wealth that we've been able to achieve for various reasons. So I think it's a good bill, and I appreciate you bringing forward to it. And I see the fiscal note, and I don't think what's factored into it is that folks probably will spend this to meet daily living expenses, so we're going to generate sales tax on top of that. So that's not really factored into this. So again, just want to commend you for the bill in the responsible manner in which we're handling this surplus funds we have available to us. And I think it's great for Kentucky, but particularly our working men and women and families. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator West.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this committee is currently working on the biennial budget, and we've been in budget talks for a while. I'm going to ask you this question yesterday. Could you comment on how this bill affects that process? And we've had hundreds of requests for new spending, and if you could just explain, that this doesn't spend all the money we have as part of that process, that there is additional revenue available for many of those types of items. If you could just comment on that, please.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. Yes, so this actually does not even touch the biennial budget whatsoever. It actually deals with a current year appropriation, which is money that was actually appropriated in March of last year. But on top of that, it does, kind of as we discussed, it leaves $800 million of current year appropriation, or of current year dollars, to either be plowed into more current year appropriations, or also to be carried forward into the next year to appropriate. And right now, we're probably staring at some pretty substantial surpluses in fiscal 23 and 24 as well. And we'll just have to see what those look like after the budgeting process. But certainly, Senator, you're absolutely correct. This does not touch the biennial process and still leaves us a very substantial carry forward into that period.
Thank you.
Senator Nemes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing forth this bill. Before, we did not have enough money to allocate for the needs and wants of the state. This year, we have extra funds. Usually, government, if they have extra funds or even close to the amount they need, they get giddy and spend it on probably good causes. But we are adamant with our chairman of you, Mr. McDaniels, that we are not going to spend the money on down payments for future programs that we may not have the money for. So I want the public to understand that. And this extra money is in part because of General Assembly's frugal budgeting the last couple of years. And some want us to spend the money on ways that we think the state needs and this and that and another for good causes and that. But I'm glad that we're giving it back to the people that paid for it. We have some extra money, give it back. We overtax them. And if there are people saying, well, you should spend it on this or that, well, then let the people decide. You take your part and spend it on that. Give it to what charity, give it to whatever you want. That's what this bill does, and I appreciate you for it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really want to thank you for this bill. I've been talking to my constituents the last couple of days, and frankly, there were a lot of people who worked really, really hard for the last 2 years through all of this COVID issue. They spent a lot of time away from their friends and a lot of time away from their families. They're being rewarded. They're being rewarded for the time that they spent away from their families and their friends. And I thank you for this. Also, what I like about this, it is a nonpartisan bill. It seems that everybody thinks that everything we do here in the General Assembly is partisan. This is a nonpartisan distribution in this bill. It rewards those who participated more vigorously in the workforce, and it doesn't affect those who did not. So I thank you for that. And we know this money will re-enter the economy because it is already going to those who are putting money into the economy. So I wanted to thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, at this time, we've adopted the committee substitute, so I will entertain a motion on the bill by Senator Meredith. I have a second by Senator Nemes. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Carroll.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to vote aye and explain my vote.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I think there are two ways to look at this, and from the conservative aspect and looking at all the struggles we have in the Commonwealth, there's an argument to invest it towards the future, to use this surplus funds maybe towards the pension systems. And then there's an argument that is very sound to give it back to the people who gave it to us at a time that they need it drastically and at a time that we can do so. And that is a valid argument. And so even though there is a part of me that wants to invest it for the future, for the next generations, to kind of help alleviate the problems that we struggle with every year and the problems that are going to continue as far as pension goes. But you can't argue against giving it back to the people that are really struggling right now, and therefore I will vote aye.
Senator Caslin. Senator Douglas.
Aye.
Senator Gibbons. Senator Kerr. Senator McGarvey. Senator Meredith. Senator Nemes.
Aye.
Senator Webb. Senator West. Chair McDaniel.
Aye. There being 7 aye votes, no nay votes, the measure passes with favorable expression. We do have a title amendment. I'll entertain a motion on the title. Senator Gibbons, second by Senator Nemes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Very well. Title amendment is adopted. Seeing no other business to come before the committee.